Good afternoon, everybody. Our firm is architecting and designing the entire Citizen-SBI intervention. And over the next 14 months, it will reach out to all 200,000 people in State Bank of India. But more important for all of us here, there are some principles, there are some approaches sitting there, which might tell us how we are going to make much of what we've been speaking about practical, real, doable in our organization. And I think that is the focus of my conversation and my descriptions of what is going on here. Let me start with, the background to this project. About when we started 3 years ago, 2.5, 3 years ago, we first did a quick diagnostic of what were some of the high-level challenges that any organization, and particularly State Bank, would face if it was trying to enter the next 20 years or the next 50 years as clearly a leader organization which is embracing the new reality completely. So what would an organization that enters the new world deal with? What would be the issues? There are 3 issues that we figured out are the most important issues. They are the 3 sides of the triangle. First is, how do you create a customer fulfilling organization? Now this is a trick word. Customer fulfilling is not the same as customer servicing. Customer servicing says that I have a product or a service and this is what I'm giving and I will try to do it as well as I can for you. But customer fulfilling starts with the customer and says, what is it that is needed to fulfill your goals, your aspirations, your needs? And now let me work backwards in designing my services and models so that I'm able to serve that effectively. That is the meaning of that word, customer fulfillment. The second side of the triangle is about engaging proactively with customer communities. This resonates very strongly with what was spoken about in the morning about organizations who take it to the 3rd level of engagement with the marketplace and who are talking about engaging proactively with communities, becoming friendly with them, or probably taking it one step further and probably becoming people who endear themselves to communities. Now, how do you do that in a conscious, strategic way which translates itself into hundreds of specific initiatives on the ground? How do I take this high-level thought and convert it into actionables on a day-to-day basis in hundreds of communities across a nation like India? So then that problem becomes fairly complex problem. So that is the second problem that is sitting there. The third side is, how do I close what you might call an actualization gap? What is an actualization gap? Actualization says, I know what to do, but I do not know how to actualize it or realize it. I do not know how to translate vision into action. I do not know how to actualize a thought so that it becomes real to me and to everybody, so that the value that I have envisioned is completely realized for the world at large. And there are hundreds of actualization gaps that are taking place in any organization every day. There are hundreds of meetings where dreams and aspirations are thrown up. I wish we could do this, but then the biggest challenge that many leaders face is, how do I get people to say, now I'm going to make it happen, I'm going to tie everything together and cross it. What stops them? Not necessarily their integrity, but also organizational structures, silos, functional mental models. All kinds of things can stop that actualization from taking place. So these 3 were the 3 sides of the triangle that we identified. But beneath these 3 dimensions of the challenge lies a much deeper central challenge. How do we scalably, meaningfully, and if I may say so, with the least amount of stress, actually transform mindsets? How do we get people to discover and embrace these mindsets? Not tell them, because no human being, you can't change the mindset of your own kids. So what are we talking about, changing mindsets of hundreds of people from your side? That doesn't happen. What happens in practice is that people choose a new mindset. They choose to struggle with themselves. They choose to embrace something new. So how do you create that discovery space? That space where people say, yes, I'm going to put in what it takes to make it happen. And how do we do it replicably across thousands and thousands of people? That is the challenge which any organization that wants to transit or that wants to make the shift to a new world has to deal with. So this was the background behind what we wanted to do. We started with this diagnosis. Then came the next question. How are you now going to solve this problem? Are you going to solve it by doing a detailed analysis of each person's mindset? Are you going to sit there and ask people what they like, what they don't like? Are we going to say, okay, here's a list of 40 values and please tick mark which are the values that are most relevant or salient to you and which are the values that are not salient to you? I'm not so sure that we're going to get anywhere with it, because many of those values themselves are amorphous, they're changing, they're evolving. Human beings themselves are in motion. They are transforming people. They are not a set of data objects that I can deal with. So how am I going to then engage with them meaningfully? So then the whole strategy is one not of starting with the data, but of creating the future. How do I envision that world that people want to enter into? What is it that's going to inspire people to say, yes, I'm going to change, yes, I'm going to practice? That starting point is an equilibrium space inside human beings. That space is called a state of living. Every one of us aspires for various states of living, sometimes more than one, sometimes one. When we experience it, we know it. We talk about it, we say, I never was happier than I was during those few days doing this or doing that. And of course, there are times when you are very happy for 1 week, but you say that's not enough. I also want this other state of living, because I want to work very hard, I also want to rest well, I want to do A, B, C, D, and then comes the real question. How do I perceive those deeper states of living that reconcile these irreconcilables in my life? What is that state of living? How do we find that state of living that state bankers want? He said that the best thing to do is to ask them. And the best thing for them is not to ask them in a questionnaire, but ask them to envision that reality. Now, envisioning, as I see it, is very different from dreaming. Envisioning is a conscious, rigorous, documented process that is going to ask people to be disciplined about where they want to go. Which means you inbuild into the envisioning process many of the challenges that you have, but you also inbuild into that the willingness to say that I'm going to engage with those challenges in some way or the other. So that envisioning is what we did first, and that envisioning is expressed in that visual out there, which is the Citizen-SBI logo. So we started out with envisioning this new state of citizenship called Citizen-SBI or citizenship. And when we did that, the interesting thing that we discovered is that the very act of envisioning, the very process of getting 1,000 people to imagine rigorously that state of living was a change process by itself. It meant that people were talking stories which they wanted shared in the organization. It meant that there was a consensus building up as to what was that vision that we wanted, and at the same time, most important, it was an inside-out process. No consultant on earth can come and tell your organization what you should be. Nobody can come and tell your family members how they should be. You will figure that out yourself. So the task that any envisioning process or any process which evolves this new state of living is to let people figure it out themselves in a meaningful sort of way. So this is what we did first. And after we did that, when we saw this new state of living, how did we describe that state of living? We described it through narratives, through stories, through examples, and most important, through challenges and responses. We said, if this is the challenge, this is the response of someone whom we want to be. How would a citizen deal with a customer like this? How would a citizen engage with a challenge like this? How would a citizen engage with a marketplace like this? So you just simply ask the question, if this person was real, if this person was someone whom I knew, how would he engage with the world? And as you saw it, it became someone who people aspired to. And once we did that, then came the next point. That is when we realized what the agenda was. That the agenda for change is really one of a change in heart, a change in head, and a change in behavior. All the three changes have to come simultaneously. In our view, if you want to really bring about concrete practitioner change in the way people act and live, then you cannot do it intellectually. You have to do it simultaneously in speaking to their own vision of personal fulfillment. They have to know what they are going to get out of it at a deep level. B, they need to know how it's going to translate into their vision of enlightened self-interest. And they also need to know how they need to act on a day-to-day basis, which means that they need some concrete things to do tomorrow. They also need a vision of what their life will look like, and they also need to know what is the philosophical framework behind their actions. Once you tie all the three things together, then you start seeing an agenda for this new vision of who is this citizen. Our next question was that, how do you make this happen? How do you pull this off? And to pull this off, what we've done, and now I'll just share with you the model that we are using as a matter of description. The first thing that we have done, if you look at it, is perceiving the ideal. We have actually designed a program which you could call an Ideals Discovery Program. It's a program where over 2 days, people discover for themselves what that new Citizen-SBI looks like, feels like, talks like, and what does it mean to them. In other words, that ideal is articulated. And in that articulation, it's not an articulation made by the organization. It is a discovery space in which the articulation is made by the individual. The individual interprets a large level ideal. Now, has this happened elsewhere in the world? It's happened consistently. It's happened in Samurai Japan, when they talk about a samurai ideal. It happens in the Bodhisattva ideal of the Buddhists. It happens in the Brahminical ideal in ancient India. And there have been thousands of very, very great people who have interpreted that ideal in their own life. They have said that, yes, I agree with this high level ideal, but this is how I will lead it. Which means that there is a tremendous space for personal creativity and personal creation in this whole process of change. We don't want change to be a forced process. We want it to be a process where people discover this change. So that is the first intervention that we are carrying out. We've already begun, and over the next 3 months, we intend to reach out to all 200,000 people using about 400 to 500 trainers across the country. And after we do that comes the second thing that we are doing, which is to change the modes of thinking. How does this change into customer fulfillment and customer service on a day-to-day basis? For which we are doing a 10-month practice program. The key word here is practice. The key word here is not 10 months. The key word here is, how do I embed that practice into day-to-day life? That is the second piece that was done. The third thing that is done is that they are consciously going out into communities. We have actually identified already more than 40 to 50 critical best practices in that organization, where individual branch managers or regional managers in State Bank have actually gone out and brought about profound social and technical change in the communities they serve. We said, okay, if this can be done, why don't we institutionalize this? Why don't we actually get hundreds of people or various other regions in the country to do the same thing? And that is what we are institutionalizing and sharing on an organized basis across the bank. That's where we intend to transform the entire social contract of the bank with the community. We are not here as a financial services provider. We are here as somebody who are in tune with their aspirations, aspirations. We are here to serve your aspirations. So that social contract is one of service and of deep engagement with the community, and not one of product or product selling or service delivery. So there are two different, completely different social contracts between the organization and the world around. So if you notice, the first one is a personal contract with myself. What is my new ideal of life? How am I going to live my life? The second is a contract in terms of a service contract. When you come to me for work, how am I going to engage with you in a manner that's meaningful to you? At the third level, it's a market contract or a community contract. What is the role I'm playing in a community? And finally, there is a contract of the senior management with the organization, which says that if you want to do all these things, what is it that we as senior managers will do in order to help you achieve that? So this is the framework of the entire intervention. Obviously, the time available doesn't quite give us time to go much deeper than this, but I hope I've given you a sense of what such a large-scale project or such a large-scale deep change project would involve. So, thank you.